In the cartoon world, flushing an airplane toilet would mean that the waste would come flying down and probably land on an unfortunate person. But today, we'll explain what happens when you flush an airplane toilet, at least for the majority of the time. Stay tuned to find out what actually happens when things go wrong. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button to never miss another video, and don't forget to give us a big thumbs up. Let's check out what actually happens when you flush an airplane toilet. Pneumatic vacuum. You probably noticed that the sound of a toilet being flushed on a plane is slightly louder than a regular flush sound. Okay, maybe not just slightly louder, it's sometimes so loud it leaves us wondering if everyone else on the plane can hear us flush the toilet, and gives us some serious snakes on the plane flashbacks. Don't worry, there are no snakes on most of the planes, but there is another reason why airplane toilets make such loud sounds. The sound is why people often assume that the remains simply get somehow released in the sky, but that's not exactly true. After you flush the toilet, the waste gets exposed to a pneumatic vacuum, which is air-operated and designed for environments where electricity is not largely available. So when the toilet valve opens up, the vacuum takes care of every content into a closed waste system, which is connected to a tank. After the plane lands, and once the tank is full, it's emptied out by a ground crew. The exterior latch you might see on a plane helps to keep the load secure and make sure the pilot doesn't accidentally press a button that would drop the entire tank mid-air. Sounds like a mess-free and organized process, right? Well, it wasn't always this way. In fact, the system came a long way from the early days. Did you know that these new systems were invented in 1975 and first installed in 1982? Stay tuned to hear about some messy accidents, but first, let's take a look at the history of airplane toilets and what people had to do to go number 2 before the vacuums were created. This system changed over the years, and airplanes during the mid-1980s had to carry large amounts of Anotech, the blue deodorizing liquid that helped push the waste from the toilet into onboard storage tanks. The planes required so much Anotech that they had to increase their fuel consumption and reduce the number of passengers during flights. It doesn't make sense, right? The Anotech also included so much bleach, it irritated people's skin and even eyes. What's even worse is that the early systems were prone to leaking, which meant the waste would actually drop from the sky once the plane landed. While this still happens, it's definitely not as bad as it was in the early days. If you think about it, the 1980s aren't that far away, which means people from centuries ago had to rely on other aviation toilet using methods. For example, Second World War pilots often had to use a bucket, as there was no other option available at the time. This would also mean that any kind of turbulences or unusual occurrences could easily result in an unpleasant and very smelly experience inside the aircraft. An airman once described the experience as devil's convenience and said it shared its contents with the floor, the walls, and even the ceiling during shaky times. He also reported that the container was prone to overflow during long flights, and we're pretty sure you can get the picture of how messy that might have looked. It's been reported that pilots sometimes also threw the full bucket on their targets, which can be noted as biological warfare. But overall, it sounds like airplane toilets had a long historical journey. The old days definitely weren't fun, and we're glad technology allows us to use modern airplane toilets. We can really count ourselves lucky. Well, at least some of us can. Check out these very unfortunate situations of people getting the short end of the airplane stick. Blue ice damages. Have you ever heard the reports of blue ice falling from the sky? Blue ice occurs when that same blue deodorizing liquid from an airplane toilet leaks into the sky and freezes at high altitude. You'd be surprised by just how destructive airplane toilet waste can be. Between 1979 and 2003, 27 blue ice accidents were reported, and some were even so strong they smashed cars. Although no fatality was ever officially reported, the smelly but powerful incidents alone were enough of a reason for the airline industries to look into a better solution. Stay tuned to hear about some of the most unfortunate ways the so-called blue ice managed to hit people around the world. It's actually more common than you might think. A series of unfortunate events. The pneumatic vacuums, which made that loud noise on a plane, were first invented in 1975. The very first versions of this system were installed by Boeing in 1982, and it's still the same to this day. Reports of blue ice falling from the sky are no longer relevant. However, there have been several reports of toilet waste still leaking and falling on unsuspecting victims on the ground. One such is a Salt Lake resident who lives below the flight path of the international airport. She said she first thought it's a bird, but no, it turned out to be a plane. The same happened at a very unfortunate Sweet 16 birthday party where one teen's garden got covered in questionable feces. Another frozen lump of toilet waste managed to wreck a very expensive caravan in England as it fell right through the roof. In 2012, a New York couple got drenched in questionable sludge in their back patio. A woman from India even suffered from injuries after an ice ball, which was the size of a football, fell from the sky. However, it hasn't been discovered whether the ice actually is blue ice as a result of an airplane toilet leak, but we can imagine that probably wasn't a pleasant experience. And in case you're wondering, you can actually get compensated if you're ever hit by actual blue ice, although we really don't recommend waiting for that moment to happen. It seems like the flying waste is much more damaging than we ever thought it was.